Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Wednesday, Season 1, Episode 5. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, it has been a week since the end of last episode, and it is what I thought. I was like, right, because he saw something, there's no way they're just going to... I was like, were they going to kill off Eugene? They didn't, but he is in a coma, and he can't tell Wednesday the information. Once again, he saw who set fire to that cave, so... But obviously this is a complicated time because, hey, it's Parents' Day, and obviously Wednesday feels all the complications considering, hey, her parents are here, now she's got her father's file about him, especially because it's like, right, 32 years ago during the Rave Inn, he got arrested for the murder, and now it's like a week afterwards. Now it's really kind of spurred a lot of that, and now she has a opportunity because talking about it over to Cristobal would give them too much opportunity to dodge it. This would be her opportunity to face them face to face and be able to kind of get that truth kind of out there. So obviously, the Weems and Morticia stuff was really good too, because it's just like the fact is Morticia's so coy with her, like, oh yeah, there's that, like that kind of jokey side of you, Larissa. And it's like, oh, my page was torn out of here. Oh, really? I had no idea about that. Oh, do you mind if I keep this? And it's like, oh, yeah, let's do a therapy session, which Wednesday's against, and so was Morticia. But Gomez is like, no, I've always been a fan of head shrinking. It's like, Mia Moore, it's not that kind of head shrinking. He's like, oh, well, now that is really disappointing. It's like, oh, he was so hyped about it too. He's like, oh, it's not that? Oh, okay. But they do have to go through the therapy session. And because there's certain key aspects about Gomez that we hadn't really gotten. We gotten a little bit, but it wasn't until the therapy session, because obviously Wednesday talked about the fact is one of the things she dislikes is how her dad does the whole like overly emotional thing, which I guess also it's contrast with her not really liking it, because I love at one point in time he does it. He's like, I get it. The over emotional stuff makes you uncomfortable. I get it. But it's like, he did the thing where he kissed Morticia's hand and he was going up her arm. I was like, thank you! You've been kissing her hand, but you hadn't been doing the whole, Mia Moore. It's one of the things I know about Gomez. And then they also reference another thing. He's like, yes, my brother Fester, has 2 racks. I was like, oh my God, how could I forget about the stretching? That's another Gomez and Morticia thing. Gomez loving being put on the rack and being stretched out. Well, isn't Fester also like that too? I feel like, I vividly know like, Gomez is a big fan of it, but I want to say, like, didn't they lean into it in one movie and Fester was all about it too? I think Gomez, I mean, maybe that's also the reason why they're like, yes, he had an extra one, because like, that's kind of their thing. But I was like, oh my God, I feel like I vaguely remember like the animated series with him being like handcuffed to like the stretcher and the rack and just being super into it. I was like, oh my God, that's like, I feel like that is some core like Gomez. Like Gomez and Morticia all together. I was like, I love that. And I love there's Puxley being like, yeah, I've actually really missed having Wednesday around. The fact of the matter is, you know, I've missed like, you know, her waterboarding me. And then the therapist was almost like, wait, what? And he's also eating paprika the entire time. I love when he shares it with Gomez, because Gomez was kind of bummed about how everything played out. He ate the paprika. He's like, oh, got himself a fistful of it too. But yeah, Wednesday used this opportunity to like confront her parents about the murder Gomez was accused of. But then it was a thing of Gomez being like, we should tell her the truth. But Morticia's like, no, she won't believe us. In retrospect, I get why Morticia felt like that, considering what her and Wednesday's relationship is right now. If Morticia was like, no, this is what happened, it's like, you wouldn't. But at the same time, it's very true to who they are, because there is this love, I even love, what was that at the beginning? Morticia was like, oh, Gomez, being accused of murder, being taken away in handcuffs. I've never been more in love with you. I love it. God, I forget how much I love that super weird and complicated. I'm definitely going to have to add into my fictional couples list, because because it's been so long since I watched anything Addams Family related. I forget how like loving and twisted that relationship is. It's a very weird, it's not toxic, it's just like, it's this weird kind of thing that they have. It's a very Gomez and Morticia thing. That's all you can kind of label it as. When you know it, when you see it, you know it, type of situation. So, but it's like, yeah, considering where they all have been relationship-wise, I could see Morticia believing that Wednesday wouldn't believe the true story. But it's also like, yes, we find that, well, Gomez tells Wednesday the story while he was locked up, and he was just like, oh, how's your mother? It's like, right, she's devastated. She doesn't think you look good in orange or something like that. But he's telling his story, and she's like, right, I fenced enough with my dad. He, touches his mustache. He gives that very, wink of his. I love it. But it's like, yeah, he told a story of the guy that he supposedly murdered, Garrett, was obsessed with Morticia. He took her signs of her being nice and took it as oh, she's in love with me, and he became obsessed, and he became dangerous with that obsession, and he tried to kill Gomez. And Gomez says yeah, I killed him in self-defense. But then we find out the truth is Morticia killed him. It was an accident, but she tried to stop him and ended up killing him. And Gomez, doing what he can to protect the woman he loves, decided to take the fall for it. But it's right, we both knew at some point in time this was always going to come, our past was always going to come back to haunt us, It's so interesting, too, especially how that, it led to, this very powerful moment when, yes, Morticia's there at the Nightshade Society room, and she sees Wednesday. She's like, oh, hi, Wednesday. She didn't go oh my God, you know about this. It's but she does go oh, you joined the Nightshades. It's no, I rejected him. And she's like, did you do it simply because of me? It's and I love that it was a very powerful moment, her saying, how could you send me to a school that you've excelled at everything? How could you send me to a school where I would always be in your shadow? It's yeah, I won that, the Poe Cup, but it's who cares? You won it 4 times. The fencing thing, you were, captain of it and stuff like that. This secret society was kind of lame. That's my main reason. But it's yeah, you sent me to a school where I would always be in your shadows. And it's because for Wednesday, time and time again, it's a through line that they point out that Wednesday has the benefit of she never loses sight of who she is. And that was one of the things she thanked her father for. It's right. Everything that he's done, putting a blade in her hand since she was a little, since she was 5. He's your swordsmanship, your fencing was perfection. And it's getting you to swim with sharks. He's you were more cold-blooded than, they thought you were more cold-blooded than I was, or something like that. But for her, it's everything you've done was to prepare me into a world that would try and change me so that I could just maintain who I am. And that's not an easy thing, just being yourself. And that's why Wednesday has such an issue. I think now, because I was wondering if it was both her parents, but it does seem like it's more so on Morticia. She's it feels like you're trying to make me into you and not allowing me just to be me. And it does seem like obviously, I guess once she became a teenager, the angsty teen thing of I hate you, Mom. I don't love you anymore. God, you're the worst thing ever. Probably some of that angsty teen element came out. But I think it's just right. It's just that sad thing of now where Wednesday is, her and Morticia just don't know how to really talk to each other anymore. I think is what that comes down to. I love the whole thing about asking about Fingers. It's yeah, I found out about him immediately. He's okay. It's oh, are his fingers okay? Yeah, I haven't done anything to his digits. And then Gomez has his hand over his chest, almost oh, thank goodness, And it's right, how has school been treating you? She's I've been hunted. And there's been an attempt of murder on my life. And it's oh, they're Gomez is oh, nevermore. I love you so much for giving my daughter such wonderful experiences. It's actually really neat. But when it was all said and done, when Morticia told her side of things, immediately Wednesday was right, doesn't that sound a little odd to you? I immediately thought, because I was thinking right, the ravenous way he was acting, I was was it a siren thing? But it's no, it was some kind of poisoning. I forgot what it was. But yeah, apparently his dad tried to give him the poison to kill everyone in the school. During the struggle, it broke. And yeah, he was going to die regardless. It's just, I guess the poison probably ended up killing him before the blade did, but, you know, I guess that's a little bit of semantics. But it's like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of sad. It's actually a good thing. If they hadn't killed him, which, once again, was in self-defense, he would have killed everyone at his school, because Garrett's father was super anti-outcast, and he would have killed everyone there. He was a bigot. So, yeah. But they ultimately ended up figuring it out by digging up his body, which Morticia was like, oh man, it's like when we first gave you your first grave digging set when you were a little kid. She's like, do you want to join in, mother? She's like, looking at her, she's like, no, you enjoy yourself, sweetie. I was like, I thought that was so sweet. So they get busted. Gomez and Morticia are like making, oh, my love, oh, I'm so happy to see you. And just like I love Winston just being like, neither one of you will be able to survive in prison, because yeah, they would both die because they'd be separated from each other. Because she'd even told Pugsley, like, mom and dad have not, no, I think it was Pugsley that was like, yeah, mom and dad haven't been separated from each other since they tied the knot. They've always been together, which is actually really sweet. It's like, oh, we always go together. It's like, yeah, just like, I mean, it's a weird, I was about to say, like, the sun and moon. It's like, I guess you could almost say that that's kind of Morticia and Gomez, but it's like, I guess it's more like left and right. You know, I guess that's kind of more so how you probably more so allocate that. But either way, Wednesday has a vision about everything the moment she got the touched the finger again, and that triggered the vision. So they went and confronted the mayor, because he was the sheriff back then. Because I thought that is interesting. That was a line that they brought up the episode before last about him being the former sheriff. And I kind of I love that. It's like, right, that was a single line of dialogue that ends up being super important, because yeah, he was sheriff back then, and he covered up the murder because Garrett's family was wealthy. Because Sheriff Galpin was making this whole point about how the rest of that family basically died. Like, the mom hung herself, the dad drunk himself to death, and even the sister went off somewhere to Europe and ended up drowning, which we'll get to the sister soon enough. But yeah, it turns out he covered stuff up, because for him it's like, right, if I had let things kind of play out the way they did, it would have destroyed the reputation of Jericho and Nevermore. Once again, it's very much like the conversation Wednesday had with Weems like a couple episodes ago about, like, right, things are black and white. It's either us or them. Walking and towing this line of gray, you're doing more harm than good. It's what Walker did. It's like, yes, he wants to say like he was doing it for the people, but it's like, no, you just wanted to ensure your own position. So, because it wasn't, because by doing what you did, you put it all on Gomez, and you were hoping that, hey, maybe this would all stay put, but it's like, it obviously didn't, because now this all came to a head. Now, especially when the ME, the coroner, ended up blowing off his head, which I was like, all right, I didn't talk about it, but was that last episode? Yeah, where he had made that whole point about, like, oh, he was retiring. I was like, oh, there's always that whole point about, like, hey, I'm going to be retiring. I mean, by that point, it was after he had already retired, because I think he said, like, right, it had already been a week, so he was probably already retired by that point in time, but it's like, oh, that is also an interesting conundrum that came up. It's like, yeah, he killed himself in the morgue, so we don't know where to take the body. I was like, well, I guess you'd have to take it to a different morgue in a different city then, which is weird to think about. It's like, oh, that has to have come up at some point in time. Someone had to have dropped dead in the morgue, and you're like, well, we'll just put them in here. But the problem is, in this particular case, the morgue was also a crime scene, and you couldn't disturb the crime scene, so you had to put his body somewhere else, so you had to take him most likely to a different morgue. But, like, yeah, I'm sure someone dropping dead in a morgue is kind of ironic. So it's like, oh, ironic yet convenient, because you're like, well, we already have these drawers here, the body just dropped dead, let's bring in people to make it official, and let's just slap it in one of these drawers after we do the autopsy. You know, so there's probably all of that. But either way, putting all that aside, it was kind of nice seeing Morticia and Wednesday kind of like going at the mayor in tandem about, like, right, we're going to get all the charges dropped on Gomez, and a sincere apology from, like, the sheriff's department. And it's like, yeah, they made that happen. Which even Gomez is like, hey, I don't hold grudges. I hold blood. Was it like a blood oath or something like that he was saying? Like blood pacts or something like that is like almost kind of like you owe me something in blood almost kind of. But it's like, yeah, him and Sheriff Galpin actually kind of like dapped it up like they were good at the end of all this. Because it's like, yeah, my son and your daughter have actually gotten pretty close, which he's like, right, he must be a really good person because he was like, because Wednesday would never accept any less. And even Galpin being like, yeah, he gets that from his mom. Because he had just had that scene earlier where he was with Tyler, and Tyler was making the whole remarker like, well, at least Adam's family are willing to go to therapy together. He's like, I'm not going to get there and sit there and talk about my feelings and personal stuff with some stranger. He's like, you think it's an easy thing for me, Dad? But it's like, yeah. It shows that, yes, his dad has a softer spot. Like I said, I think whatever their circumstances are, whatever they've been through, I think he overcompensates with it by diving into work because that's, because he's from a different generation where it's like, yeah, you quote unquote man up by burying your feelings. You don't talk about it, which is like obviously the most unhealthy, self-destructive thing that you could possibly do, so. It'll be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. But I thought that was such a sweet line for him to say, and especially once again, at the same time, him and Gomez are kind of making up and they're good. There was also like circling, I didn't talk about it, but I did love the whole Pugsley thing of him throwing the grenades because it's like, right, mom's going to need you, especially if dad's going to be locked up because they can't be separated from each other. So it's like, it's up to us to be strong. And she's like, by us, I mean you, because he's the one that is more in touch with his feelings than she is. So I even love him being like, stop being nice to me. It doesn't suit you. But I also love the situation with Morticia and her circumstances, describing it with the visions with Wednesday, where it's like, hey, I'm here to always help you. My visions are brought about by positivity, making me a dub. You, it's like, right, mine are brought about by my like negative emotions and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, I mean, my negativity. So it's like, yeah, it makes you a raven. But it's like, right, it's like, I can't teach you. The only person who can is someone who's dead in the bloodline. That obviously being Goody, because she's the one who actually started the Nightshade Society. It was her way to counter Joseph Crackstone. In fact, she's actually the one that killed him. But I thought it was interesting where Morticia was like, be careful around Goody. She was so ingrained with revenge, it basically ended up being her undoing. So it's like, right, she is this spirit warning you, but she is a vengeful spirit in some regards, and that I mean, understandably, it's like her mom as well as him wanting to basically genocide all outcasts. That's a large amount of supernatural creatures he was willing to kill and wanted to kill, and it's like, right, we do see that history repeats itself. So that's why I'm wondering, like, is the Gates family, I mean, there has to be some correlation to Joseph Crackstone. Like, that has to be like their ancestors or something like that. Maybe they eventually changed their name or something, or maybe it's like marriage upon marriage like led to that family. Because it just seems like there's got to be a correlation there, isn't there? Did they make one about them being related to the Crackstones? I don't remember. Because yeah, the whole point was like claiming that they claimed that that's what especially the family's beef with Gomez was, because it's like, right, his family, they're claiming that his family, no, they were claiming that Nevermore was built on land that belonged to the Gates, like that was stolen from them like 200 years ago or something like that. So once again, if there's any correlation with the Crackstones, I'm not sure, but there has to be a connection there. But staying on the Gates, we saw a picture of the family in the file, and immediately I'm like, is that who Thornhill is? Is she the daughter? I mean, once again, their daughter supposedly like went to Europe, came back. While she was in Europe or whatever, transferred to Europe or whatever. She was the only other living member they were aware of, but they were just like, yeah, she drowned. I'm like, she has to be, because obviously she was a normie too. Like, I know also we know that Thornhill knows about the snapping two fingers and entering the Nightshade, so you're like, there's gotta be some correlation there. So, still trying to figure out her secret, but I'm like, if that's the case, does that mean she's trying to accomplish the same thing? Once again, I was like, please don't tell me Christina Ricci's gonna end up being the bad guy. You know, full-blown bad guy. But it's like, maybe she's meant to be a red herring. Maybe it's actually someone else who is the daughter. But the fact is they show that family picture must mean that someone in that family is still alive. So, I mean, it specifically has to be Garrett's sister, but we'll see. I should also talk about it too. I think a very important thing that should be talked about. This episode, this show in general, is a nice reminder that sometimes I forget just how extremely beautiful and sexy Catherine Zeta-Jones is. It's wild because you're just like, oh man, she always looks sexy, but like the Morticia look looks really sexy on her, dude. It's wild. I think prior to this, I want to say Prodigal Son's the most recent thing I've seen her in. If you've never seen Prodigal Son, she's in the second season. She has a pretty recurring role in it. It's not a role I would have expected seeing Catherine Zeta-Jones in, but it's like, yeah, that's kind of crazy. Either way, it's just like, yeah, kind of just a nice reminder. Either way, Wednesday wasn't the only one kind of going through some family issues this episode. So was Bianca, which we met her mom. Well, Bianca and Enid were having specifically mother issues too. So I think that's kind of the parallel that's going there. There's actually, this episode was really like very mother centric with some elements of fathers, because obviously there's everything with Garrett's father. There's everything with Tyler and the complicated relationship with his father. Obviously Wednesday and her father, but also Xavier, his father didn't show up to the parent thing yet again, and it seems like it's a recurring thing. But we even met Eugene's mothers, who were both gushing about how all Eugene would ever talk about is Wednesday, because she was like the only friend he's ever made, having someone join like the B club with him and stuff like that, which makes her feel even more guilty about like, right, she's like, I'm the one that should be in this like hospital bed right now, not you. But circling back to it, Bianca's mom shows up, and she's kind of like, now you're kind of, once again, I said it last episode that usually people acting the way they do is usually a response to overcompensating for something. So her need to be Queen Bee and act the way she is, I think it's an overcompensation because of her mother. Because her coming to Nevermore was her way to reinvent herself. Because it seems like her mom met some guy named Gideon, and they're kind of leading a cult. He's taking advantage of the fact is, I guess, like, it was just her and her mom when Gideon and her met, and he's kind of taking advantage of it and using her powers to kind of lead a cult. But now things are like, her powers, I think, are kind of waning, and so she wants Bianca to come back home. But Bianca's like, no, I reinvented myself. It's like, no. If you don't do it, I'll tell everyone. Everyone here will find out what a fraud you are, that you basically try to put yourself in kind of a higher society standing. Because I guess it might be a thing of that's once again the overcompensation, that she's putting herself as like, oh yeah, I'm cool. I'm part of the elite squad, because she came from an upbringing where maybe her and her mom struggled, but then they got mixed up in this cult stuff, and it's like, it's not the way Bianca wanted to live her life. So she reinvented herself, apparently used her siren abilities to get into Nevermore. But the problem is, like, Bianca doesn't want to give this up, but her mom's like, yeah, you're going to come back and start working with the family again, because it's like, yeah, you're going to make right with that. And so Bianca's like, right, at the end of the year, I'm yours, but once I do this for you, I am done. I never want to see you in my life again, you or him. Which it does seem like that they kind of strike a chord with Bianca's mom, because like, I think despite everything, in her own way, you know, it's like, yeah, I had to force your hand, but I was thinking maybe when this was all said and done, we would work together, work it out. But yeah, I don't know, she just, that the last shot of her made it seem like she did almost like it did cut deep, you know, maybe not nearly as deep as when Wednesday was like, well, I knew you were never capable of murder, father. And he's like, well, that stings, but gracias, my little death trap. And then circling to Enid, her circumstances, it turned obviously like her mother is kind of looking at her like, oh, you still haven't wolfed out, yada yada yada. And Enid's trying, like, she knew it was all, because her mom's one of those moms that's just kind of like nitpicky, and she's just like, cool, took you 3 whole seconds to kind of nitpick about stuff, Mom, asking like, oh, you're anemic, have you been eating enough red meat stuff? It's like, yeah, yes, Mom, leave me alone, Mom. And her dad's kind of the silent type. I think he only speaks when he needs to speak. Because I think for him, he doesn't want to speak. He wants Enid. I think that's why he didn't speak up, because he wanted Enid to find the confidence. And I think coming to Nevermore gave her the confidence to kind of say what she needed to. I think, honestly, I think Wednesday's been a positive influence on Bianca and Enid. I think because of that, both Enid and Bianca were able to stand up to their respective mothers. I think Wednesday's, expression and just the way she handles herself, the way she carries herself, might have been an influence on them. Maybe I'm grasping at straws thinking that, but I do think like it probably at the very least has helped to some degree. But Enid's mom was trying to send her to these lycanthropy camps. You kind of force it, and it's like, oh, it worked for your cousin, but it's like, right, the problem is, Mom, you can't accept me as me. And she's like, I'm gonna stay here at Nevermore, I'm not going to those camps. And her mom just kind of walked away, but her dad's like, yeah, you do you, kiddo, I'm proud of you, I love you, and walks away. So we'll see how that plays out. I think the dad's just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna let your mom do her, but I believe in you, kiddo. If this is what you want to do, I got your back, you got my support. So, but like I said, I want to assume, like, right, he doesn't say anything, because, it's like, right, it's a marriage and you don't want to turn that into a fight, but it's also like maybe the lesson of it was like you wanted Enid to step up for herself. Like you didn't, like that's part of growing up, being able to kind of defend yourself and be like, no, this is the path I chosen for myself. Very neat parallel to Wednesday, and same thing for Bianca, because Wednesday, Morticia was like, right, yes, I was looking through this yearbook, and yes, it was my life, mine. My experiences are mine. They're not yours. You already have your own path. So it's kind of the same thing for the others as well. But looking through the yearbook, Wednesday confronts Weems, because she found out, like, right, they made that whole point earlier in the episode, oh, your impression of Judy Garland was seamless, and it's like, because she literally shapeshifted into Judy Garland. It's like, now I know you're the one that was there, you're the one that shapeshifted into Rowan, and she admits it. Apparently Rowan's father is also okay with this, and they're like, wait, Wednesday's like, wait, what? It's like, yes, Rowan, his telekinesis was kind of making him go a little crazy, so yes, it's terrible, but it prevented the school from, oh my god, I'm forgetting how she said it. It's going to bother me, because Gwendolyn Christie, obviously the character, but also herself, is British. She said controversy a very interesting way. I had to go like, wait, what? I forgot how she said it. It was like, was it conservatory or something like that? I'm butchering it, but it was such a mind blow. I was like, wait, what? I've never heard someone British say controversy before. I was like, wow. I mean, it's like aluminum versus aluminium. It's like, wow, that's so interesting. Language, and regional language too. Language already in general is such an interesting thing, but then you add in regional, like, dialects and stuff like that. It's fascinating to hear that, obviously, like, depending on what region you come from, like, there are certain slangs that might exist in, like, the South here in the U.S. that don't exist in the Midwest or the North or something like that. Like, for example, like, I think it's a Midwest thing, isn't it? Like, it might be a Southern thing too, but I think it's just a Midwest thing that sodas are referred to as pop. But like, I've gone my entire life, I know that as a fact now, but I've gone my entire life calling, no, sodas are sodas. But people call them pop. It seems very old-timey, but I think even like in the Midwest, that's it. I'm going on a tangent, but I was like, what? I was like, that was so crazy to me. That was the one thing I pulled out of that conversation. I was like, wow, the way they say controversy is so different. And I'm saying it like British people are some alien species, like, oh, they say things differently than us. It's almost that same, but it's like, once again, language is a beautiful, crazy thing. That's why I was like awestruck by that. Either way, but also, like I said, to know that, because I was like to say, like, Rowan's family they have to be under the impression that he's still here, but it's like, no, at least his father's okay with it, because my son was kind of going crazy. And once again, my reasonings for knowing why Weems did it is also the reasons why Rowan's father supports it. It's because, hey, we don't need all that coming to Nevermore. But in that moment, Wednesday was like, right, you're the same thing as Mayor Walker, which obviously we learned 2 episodes ago that she is the reason why Nevermore's kind of given the position that they are, because she's the reason that she pays off the mayor. And he told Gilpin, like, hey, like, they're the reason why the city's able to prosper, the town's able to prosper the way they are, even telling Gilpin, like, hey, that's even where your paycheck comes from. But, like, she sent a massive donation to his campaign fund and as re-election, and that's a whole equilibrium of how they keep this balance going. It's not a real balance, it's a fabricated balance to look real, but eventually that facade will shatter, and I think we're already seeing it already, so. But then we had that thing at the end where someone left a sign saying that fire will rain, literally written in fire. So what that fully entails, whether that was just a normie thing or whether that's just all the craziness that's going down recently coming to a head and manifesting like that, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.